The 1970s gave us Led Zeppelin, Stevie Wonder, Fleetwood Mac, and David Bowie. It also gave us some of the most aggressively forgettable music ever committed to vinyl. Here are 13 of the worst bands from the 1970s that nobody wants back. Number 13. Starland Vocal Band.
Sky rockets in flight. Afternoon.
This one starts with an injustice. In 1977, the Grammy Award for Best New Artist went to Starland Vocal Band. The band they beat? Boston, whose debut album had just become one of the best-selling rock records in American history. That single Grammy decision remains one of the more inexplicable calls in the award's long history of inexplicable calls. Starland Vocal Band was a Washington, D.C.-based vocal quartet made up of two married couples, Bill and Taffy Danoff, and John Carroll and Margot Chapman. Bill Danoff had already co-written John Denver's Take Me Home Country Roads in 1971, which established his credentials as a songwriter with a certain gentle, radio-friendly touch. In 1976, he was eating lunch at a Georgetown restaurant called Clyde's when he noticed an item on the menu called Afternoon Delight. He went home and wrote a song around the title that day, a cheerful, sunlit pop song with a chorus referencing skyrockets in flight. The double entendre was obvious to everyone who heard it. The song hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 on July 10, 1976, and stayed there for 2 weeks. The success of the single led to a CBS variety television series, The Starland Vocal Band Show, which ran in the summer of 1977 for 6 episodes before being canceled. The show's main lasting contribution to American culture was that it featured a then-unknown 29-year-old comedian and writer named David Letterman as a series regular, one of his first significant television appearances. The band itself never had another hit. They released 3 more albums that went nowhere, disbanded in 1981, and became a permanent fixture on every worst songs of the 1970s list compiled since. Rolling Stone readers voted Afternoon Delight the second worst song of the decade in a 2011 poll. The song has appeared in Good Will Hunting, Boogie Nights, and Anchorman, The Legend of Ron Burgundy, all of which used it for comic effect.
Sky rockets in flight. Afternoon.
Number 12. The Captain and Tennille. Daryl Dragon and Toni Tennille, the Captain and Tennille, were a married couple who had a remarkably consistent run of hit singles in the mid-1970s, including Love Will Keep Us Together, which reached number 1 in 1975 and won them a Grammy Award for Record of the Year. By most commercial measures, they were one of the most successful acts of the decade, also one of the most relentlessly cheerful acts of the decade, which was itself a kind of offense against the era's better musical instincts. Their cover of Muskrat Love, a song about 2 muskrats falling in love, complete with what sounds like actual muskrats squealing in the mix, reached number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1976 and was performed at the White House for Queen Elizabeth II during her state visit that year. It was not universally appreciated. Johnny Carson reportedly mimicked retching whenever the subject of Muskrat Love came up on The Tonight Show. Rolling Stone readers placed Muskrat Love 5th on their list of the worst songs of the 1970s. Toni Tennille went on to a respectable solo career. Daryl Dragon, known as the Captain for the nautical hats he always wore on stage, was diagnosed with renal failure in later years and died in January 2019. They had separated and divorced in 2014, but Tennille cared for Dragon through his illness until his death. 11. Terry Jacks.
We had joy, we had fun, we had seasons in.
Terry Jacks was a Canadian singer-songwriter who had one massive hit and then effectively vanished from the pop landscape. Seasons in the Sun, a cover of a French song called Le Moribond by Jacques Brel, translated and adapted into English by Rod McEwen, reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in March 1974 and sold over 6 million copies worldwide. It is one of the best-selling singles of the 1970s. It is also, by a wide margin, one of the most relentlessly mournful pop songs ever written. The song is narrated by a dying man saying goodbye to his loved ones, his father, his best friend, and his wife, who had an affair with that best friend. It is suffused with a particular brand of AM radio melancholy that critics found appalling and audiences found irresistible. It spent 3 weeks at number 1 in the United States and reached the top of the charts in multiple countries.
By Michelle, my little one.
The original French version by Brel is a genuinely moving piece of work. McEwen's English translation softened and sentimentalized it considerably. Jax's recording softened it even further, adding a bouncy melodic quality that sits uncomfortably against the lyric's subject matter. It is a genuinely strange artifact, a song about death that sounds like it was designed to sell soft drinks. After the success of Seasons in the Sun, Jax had 2 minor follow-up hits and then faded. He lives in British Columbia, has remained largely private, and seems unbothered by the song's complicated legacy.
We had joy, we had fun, we had seasons in.
Number 10. Rick Dees.
All of a sudden I begin to change.
Rick Dees was a Memphis radio disc jockey who recorded Disco Duck in 1976 as a joke, a comedic novelty song built around Dees doing a Donald Duck-style duck voice over a disco beat. He recorded it for about 24 hours in total. He genuinely did not expect it to be taken seriously. It reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in October 1976. It stayed there for 1 week. It sold over 1 million copies in the United States. It won a Grammy Award. It is, by the consensus of almost everyone who has weighed in on the subject, the worst song of the entire decade. Rolling Stone readers voted it number 1 on that list in 2011. The story doesn't end there. RSO Records, who distributed the single in the UK, used Dees's name and image on the release without a proper agreement. He sued and eventually received a settlement. His radio career, meanwhile, became genuinely successful. He went on to host the Rick Dees Weekly Top 40, a syndicated show that ran for decades and was heard on hundreds of radio stations worldwide. He made his career in radio, not music, which is arguably the correct decision given the available evidence. The duck voice has never been deployed again in a recording context. This is the correct outcome. Number 9. Debby Boone. Debby Boone is the daughter of Pat Boone, herself a singer, and in 1977 she recorded You Light Up My Life, a song originally written for a film of the same name by Joe Brooks. The song spent 10 weeks at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1977 and 1978, which at the time was the longest consecutive run at number 1 in the chart's history. It won the Academy Award for Best Original Song and the Grammy for Song of the Year. The length of its chart run generated significant resentment among people who had different ideas about what should have been at number 1. It is a slow, extremely gentle ballad with Christian-inflected lyrics about light and hope, and it generated a backlash roughly proportional to its success. Critics found it syrupy and overlong. Radio programmers played it until listeners called in to request that it stop. Paul Simon referred to You Light Up My Life in the song 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover era as representing a specific kind of toothless radio product. Boone never had another major hit. She continued performing in Christian music circles, appeared in touring theater productions, and has been an active advocate for various faith-based causes. The song itself has become a permanent exhibit in the Museum of 1970s Excess. Number 8. Bay City Rollers. The Bay City Rollers were a Scottish pop band who, in the mid-1970s, generated a level of teenage hysteria in the United Kingdom that their music arguably did not justify. Managed by Tam Payton and signed to Bell Records, the group, centered on Les McKeown, Eric Faulkner, Stuart Wood, Alan Longmuir, and Derek Longmuir, dressed in tartan-trimmed bell-bottom trousers and half-mast trousers that became their trademark look. Their fan base was predominantly teenage girls, and the scenes at their concerts were compared by the British press to Beatlemania. Shang-a-Lang reached the UK Top 5 in 1974. Bye Bye Baby reached number 1 in the UK in 1975. Give a Little Love went to number 1 in the UK the same year. Their 1976 single, I Only Want to Be With You, went to number 12 on the Billboard Hot 100, their biggest US hit. For approximately 18 months, the Bay City Rollers were one of the most commercially significant pop acts in the world. The music was a particular kind of polished, inoffensive teen pop that had no pretensions toward anything beyond its immediate commercial purpose. Critics hated it without much effort. The band's legacy has been further complicated by the later revelation that their manager Tam Payton had sexually abused underage boys in his care over many years. Abuse that was publicly acknowledged and legally confirmed long after the band's commercial peak had passed. Payton died in 2009. Les McKeown, the band's lead singer, died in April 2021. Several band members have spoken publicly about financial exploitation during their peak years and the emotional toll of the Payton revelations. Number 7. KC and the Sunshine Band. Harry Wayne Casey, KC, and his assembled Sunshine Band produced a run of number 1 singles in the mid-1970s that placed them at the very center of disco's commercial moment. Get Down Tonight reached number 1 in 1975. That's the Way, I Like It reached number 1 the same year. Shake Your Booty reached number 1 in 1976. Shake, 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 shake your booty. Yes, those parentheses are correct. And I Like to Do It followed in the same commercial groove. The criticism of KC and the Sunshine Band was, and remains, that the music was aggressively simple, built on the simplest possible funk patterns, devoted entirely to the mechanics of making people move in a club, and entirely uninterested in anything else. Their defenders would say that is exactly the point. Their critics would say that even within those limited parameters, there were people doing it with more soul and more invention. The Disco Demolition Night of 1979, the infamous event at Comiskey Park in Chicago, where a stadium full of people destroyed disco records and the field had to be abandoned, was in part a reaction to the kind of disposable, production line disco that KC and the Sunshine Band represented at their least inspired. The band has continued touring in various configurations for decades. Casey survived a serious automobile accident in 1982 that left him partially paralyzed and spent 2 years in recovery before returning to performing. Number 6. Village People. The Village People were an assembled studio concept created in 1977 by French producer Jacques Morali, who had noticed gay nightlife culture in New York City and decided to build a group around its most recognizable archetypes. He recruited lead singer Victor Willis and a revolving cast of performers dressed as a cowboy, a construction worker, an American Indian, a policeman, a soldier, and a leather-clad biker. The formula worked beyond any reasonable expectation. Macho Man reached the top 20 in 1978. YMCA reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 in December 1978 and became one of the best-selling singles of the decade. In the Navy reached the top 10 in 1979. The U.S. Navy was so enthusiastic about the song's potential recruitment power that they reportedly discussed allowing the Village People to film a music video on a Navy vessel. The arrangement fell apart when someone in the Navy realized what the song was actually about. The group had an enormous gay fan base and a perhaps equally enormous straight fan base that appears to have been entirely unaware of the subtext. The songs are still played at weddings, sporting events, and parties 45 years later. YMCA became particularly associated with Donald Trump's campaign events from 2016 onward, where it was played repeatedly at rallies. In 2025, Trump reportedly designated YMCA as the song to be played at his second inauguration. Morali died of AIDS in 1991. Victor Willis, the policeman, the only original member who could actually sing, became the first artist in history to successfully reclaim songwriting royalties under the Copyright Act of 1976's termination rights provisions. Number 5. Boney M. Boney M was a West German-based Euro disco act created and produced entirely by Frank Farian, the same producer who later created Milli Vanilli and the scandal that accompanied it. The group's members were performers and front people. The actual music, and often the actual vocals, were Farian's creation. Rivers of Babylon reached number 1 in the UK in 1978 and spent 5 weeks there. Rasputin, a song about the Russian mystic that described his political influence, his alleged relationships with women at court, and his ultimately unsuccessful assassination, became one of the more improbable disco hits of the decade. Mary's Boy Child / Oh My Lord reached number 1 in the UK in 1978 and became one of the best-selling singles in UK chart history. Boney M were enormous in Europe and the United Kingdom and significantly less impactful in the United States, where the disco market was already crowded. The group's music has a specific quality: bright, extremely repetitive, built almost entirely on rhythm and surface, that makes it immediately identifiable as a product of its era. It is not aged toward dignity. It is aged toward the kind of nostalgic kitsch that fills holiday compilation albums. Farian's role as the actual creative force behind the group has been documented over the decades, including by the group's own members. The Milli Vanilli scandal, when it broke in 1990, cast retrospective light on his earlier work with Boney M and the nature of his production operation. Number 4. Styx. Styx were a Chicago-based rock band who spent the late 1970s and early 1980s occupying the most aggressively middle ground in arena rock, somewhere between prog ambition and pop accessibility, never quite committing to either, always aiming at the largest possible audience with the most professionally polished possible product. They had substantial commercial success. Come Sail Away reached the top 10 in 1977. Babe, a ballad written by Dennis DeYoung, reached number 1 in 1979. The Best of Times reached number 3 in 1981. Their concept album Paradise Theater went to number 1 on the Billboard 200 in 1981 and was certified platinum multiple times. The critical establishment despised them with an almost personal intensity. The standard critique was that Styx represented everything wrong with the post-Beatles corporate rock era: technically proficient, emotionally hollow, built for the arena rather than for the soul. Their concept albums, particularly Kilroy Was Here, 1983, were criticized as overblown, self-important, and fundamentally silly. Dennis DeYoung's theatrical ambitions struck most critics as pomposity masquerading as vision. The tension between DeYoung and guitarist Tommy Shaw eventually split the band, with DeYoung departing in the late 1990s after a health crisis and a conflict over creative direction. The two factions have operated separately since, creating a situation where there are, depending on how you count, 2 versions of Styx touring simultaneously. This seems fitting for a band whose whole career involved a kind of identity crisis about what it was and what it wanted to be. Number 3. REO Speedwagon. REO Speedwagon formed in Champaign, Illinois in 1967. Spent a decade as a competent, hardworking, utterly unremarkable Midwestern rock band. And then in 1980 released High Infidelity, an album that went to number 1 on the Billboard 200 and spent 15 weeks there. Keep On Loving You reached number 1 on the Hot 100. Take It on the Run reached number 5. The album sold over 10 million copies in the United States alone. The success of High Infidelity was both the peak of their commercial career and, in the view of critics, an exhibit in everything wrong with the direction mainstream rock had taken. The sound was sleek, radio-ready, and devoted to the mechanics of the power ballad. Big choruses, dramatic builds, emotionally direct lyrics designed to reach the widest possible audience. Critics used words like schmaltzy, calculated, and corporate, with some frequency. Lead singer Kevin Cronin had written "Keep On Loving You" about his then-girlfriend. And the personal origin of the material didn't prevent it from being processed into something that felt, to a certain kind of listener, entirely impersonal. The band has continued touring for decades. They are a fixture of the summer outdoor amphitheater circuit, often paired with Styx and other contemporaries on package tours that reliably sell out. Their audience has never abandoned them. Their critical reputation has never recovered. Number 2. Toto. Toto were Los Angeles session musicians who formed their own band in 1977. Steve Lukather, David Paich, Steve Porcaro, Jeff Porcaro, David Hungate, and Bobby Kimball, and proceeded to make one of the most technically polished, professionally produced, and critically despised catalogs of the era. At the 1983 Grammy Awards, Toto won 6 awards, including Album of the Year for Toto 4, and Record of the Year and Best Engineered Recording for Rosanna. Winning 6 Grammys in a single night is one of the most remarkable competitive achievements in the awards' history. It is also the Grammy moment most frequently cited by rock critics as evidence of the award's limited relationship to artistic merit. Africa, from the same album, became one of the most recognizable songs of the decade, and, in a development nobody predicted, became an enormous ironic internet phenomenon in the 2000s and 10s, with a Namibian artist named New Yorican creating a version that played on repeat in the desert. The song was streamed billions of times. A new generation of listeners, many of whom were born after Toto had their commercial peak, treated it as a genuine discovery. Jeff Porcaro, the band's drummer, died in August 1992 at the age of 38, reportedly from a heart attack. Steve Lukather, David Paich, and various configurations of the band have continued performing under the Toto name into the 2020s. Their place in the canon of technically excellent, artistically contentious rock remains exactly where it was in 1983. Number 1. Paul Anka. Paul Anka had been famous since 1957, when he was 16 years old, and wrote and recorded Diana, a song about an older girl he had a crush on. By the 1970s, he was deep into the adult contemporary market, writing hit songs for other people, most famously the English lyrics for My Way, which he adapted from a French song and gave to Frank Sinatra in 1969, and recording his own material for an audience that appreciated craftsmanship, production polish, and a complete absence of anything challenging. In 1974, Anka released You're Having My Baby, a duet with Odia Coates that described a man's joy at learning his partner is pregnant. The song reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and spent 3 weeks there. It was a commercial success and a cultural flashpoint. The National Organization for Women gave Anka its Keep Her in Her Place award in protest, citing the song's portrayal of women. Critics savaged it. It has appeared on multiple Worst Songs of All Time lists, including Rolling Stone's Reader's Poll of the Decade's Worst, where it placed 3rd. Anka has dismissed the criticism consistently, noting that the song went to number 1 and sold millions of copies. He is not wrong about the commercial facts. He has continued performing into his 80s, releasing albums of contemporary covers and maintaining a Las Vegas residency. His catalog, including Diana, Put Your Head on My Shoulder, and Lonely Boy, belongs to an earlier era than the 1970s, which makes his 1974 chart topper feel even more anomalous. A man who had been famous since Eisenhower was president, still capable of generating genuine outrage, still capable of going to number 1. If this list brought back some uncomfortable memories, hit the like button and subscribe. There are more deep dives into the decades waiting for you.